Welcome, everybody, to Off the Cuff. I am Adam Banks. Thank you for listening to the show, coming at you live from Lexington, Kentucky, here in the Waterstone studio. This podcast is in a new studio, ladies and gentlemen, the Waterstone studio, and this is a new part of Lexington in Hamburg, the Hamburg part, so it's the east end of Lexington. So this is a brand new studio that Off the Cuff has relocated to. This is going to be Studio A. This is the main studio, and this is where the base studio will be. I like it. It's in a room that's padded, it's soundproof, and you could probably tell that the podcast really comes through clear when it's just me. Now, when there's other people on the show, I don't know how that will go. I don't know how that's going to sound yet. But this studio is set up for one person right now, so it's great. And we're making baby steps, but it's the Waterstone studio, and I'm excited about making new memories and making new episodes of the podcast in this studio. But this episode, I want to talk about my recent appearance on another podcast that I did. I did a friend of mine's podcast. It's called Friends in the Corner. And it's a podcast that he has started, and the premise of the podcast is just for him to go around and interview people that he finds interesting around town. So pretty much a local podcast. Episode 1 was Max Gotsby. He is a former UK football player. And episode 2 was yours truly, Adam Banks. So I want to have this episode be an episode where I play the interview from that podcast, Friends in the Corner podcast. You should go follow Friends in the Podcast on Facebook, Twitter. He's got all the social media websites that you can think of to access the show. It's a great show. It's very interesting. I like his content. Dan does a really good job. Me and Dan, we used to work together at BCTC at our day jobs, and we got along great. And he's now venturing into podcasting, and he wanted me to come on, and I had a fantastic job. He's got a really good setup. I mean, his setup is, you talk about his studio, you know, it's fantastic. But just go check it out. It's Friends in the Corner podcast. Check out all of the social media websites there. And I'm going to play some clips of the interview, and I'm going to let you listen to it. So I hope you enjoy it.
Welcome, everyone, to Friends in the Corner podcast, a new podcast experience here in the bluegrass state of Kentucky. My name is Dan Polly, and I am the host of Friends in the Corner, and this is episode 2, numero dos. This introduction, because we're going to get right into a great interview that we did with my next guest, Adam Banks from Off the Cuff. But now, without further ado, I want to introduce my next guest onto the podcast. My next guest is the host of Off the Cuff, another podcast here in the Lexington, Kentucky area. He covers everything from pop culture to sports to politics, and just recently he celebrated his 200th episode of Off the Cuff. 200 podcast episodes. Unbelievable. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about some of his most memorable guests that he's had on his podcast. He'll talk about the growth of Off the Cuff. He'll talk about some of his advice he gives to new podcasters, and then we're going to talk about some hot topics as well and his thoughts on certain things in the news these days. But guys, without further ado, I give you Mr. Adam Banks. 3, 2, 1.
Episode number 2 with Mr. Adam Banks of Off the Cuff. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good, Dan. Thanks for having me on the show, my friend.
Oh, my gosh. So, for those of you who don't know, Adam and I do have day jobs outside of our podcasting, but we met in our original day job together, and now he's gone off to greener pastures.
Yes, the grass was greener on the other side.
and we are, but we're here to reconnect here, and I want him just to talk a little bit here about Off the Cuff, which is his podcast here in town. So, Adam, tell us a little bit about who you are, and tell us a little bit about Off the Cuff here.
Well, Dan, it's good to see you again, my friend. It's been a good year since we've last seen each other.
Yeah, it's been a while. I was applying for promotion, and the last day I knew you were working, you said, all right. You came up, gave me some advice, and something around the lines of "just don't suck."
Yeah. Is that what I said? Just don't suck.
Maybe. It was about there.
Well, yeah. Well, it was one of those decisions, man, where I was to better my career. I always wanted to go into full-time teaching,
right?
And I had that opportunity to do that.
Where are you teaching at now?
I'm teaching at Southern West Virginia Community and Technical College.
Awesome.
It is a hellacious drive, by the way. Like, I drive a good 2 hours a day one way to the job and 2 hours back. But they have changed my schedule to where I'm only working 2 days a week now, so it's going to get better. But I always wanted to teach. And the fact that I am full-time teaching now, it was to better my career. It was a dream come true.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So I'm happy to hear that for you, man. And we miss you over at BCTC a little bit here. So you know where to find us.
Yeah, dude, I do know where to find you. That's how we know each other. We used to work together. But I am from the mountains of Eastern Kentucky. Grew up in a small town called Topmost. About 800 people live there. 799 since I left. But I went to Moorhead. Did the whole fraternity thing. I was straight up a college kid for a good 4 to 6 years because I didn't get my master's. I did it all at once. And went there, got my degree in communication, hence why I teach it now. And now just do my podcast as this hobby, man. So
that's awesome. Well, what got you into going into podcasting? What inspired you to start this podcast?
Okay, well, I've always had a fascination with radio. I used to stay with my mama a lot when I was a kid, and she used to listen to the radio all the time. And I used to listen to the radio with her. She'd always have it on. And I just really was fascinated by the radio guy that did the radio show in the morning. And I just thought his job was so cool. And the fact that he could captivate people with just the sound of his voice and the way his job was just so mysterious because you couldn't see him, but you could just envision what he looked like. And I always thought his job was just the coolest thing in the world. And I always thought to myself, that would be a really cool job to do, would be to do radio.
Yeah.
So, with just like any type of entertainment job, it's hard to go into something like that. Realistically, to go out there and get a job in it.
Right. Well, I've got a degree in journalism.
Yeah.
And, thought about radio at one point here, but it is nearly impossible unless you move to, Hoboken, Minnesota, to take a job and then move your way and keep doing the key farmer route.
Yeah, you have to be willing to move. So I knew that if I was going to get a radio job, and if I was going to wait for that job to fall in my lap, I was going to be waiting forever.
Right.
So I decided to just go out and create my own job. And I heard about this thing in 2014 called podcasting. And podcasting had really only been out just maybe a year at that point.
In 2014, you didn't know too many podcasts out there. Like you knew the idea of it, but it wasn't like everyone had a pod. Especially now, some of the most popular podcasts weren't out at the time.
Oh, it's increased. I was looking at statistics the other day of the people now that have podcasts versus last year. It's grown almost 80% from last year. So in 2014, nobody had it.
Including me now.
Yeah, including you. I mean, a lot of people, it was rare if someone had a podcast. Unlike today, a lot of people have podcasts. But in 2014, it was still very new. And I heard about the concept of it. And I was like, that's a really cool concept because it's just like radio. And it is something that has really taken terrestrial radio by storm. It's really rivaled it. People that do podcasts are rivaling people with radio shows on terrestrial radio.
That is very true. And heck, you even look now, radio stations right now are making podcast bits to put out on like iTunes and stuff like that, because they know more people are probably going to listen to the podcast side than they actually are going to listen to live radio, because it's more on their time. It's like Netflix.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what I mean? It's like you can either sit and watch a show live, or it's recorded and you can binge it all at once.
Exactly. So I heard about this concept and I said, okay, that is a way I can tie in my love and passion for radio, and it will also give me a hobby, give me something to do, something that I enjoy. And it's a way that I would be able to have my dream job, sort of, a radio show, because that is my dream job. My dream job is to still be on the radio. That is my dream job. So I said, let me just create a podcast. And that's just kind of how the genesis of the podcast started.
Where'd you come up with the name Off the Cuff at?
Okay, the name Off the Cuff, I did have to bounce around a few ideas for the name. The name did take a little bit to come up with, but I remember when I did come up with the name, I was sitting in Wendy's and I was having a cheeseburger, and I was by myself. I was on lunch break, and I was working at BCTC at that time. It was right around, I had only worked at BCTC a couple of months at this point, and I had the idea already laid out of what I wanted to do, and I was trying to come up with a name. And I said, you know, the premise of the show is going to be me talking about things without preparation. You know, I'm going to be going on the show, not even prepping for the show, just turning on the mic and going.
Love it.
Like, what is that called? That is called Off the Cuff. The definition of Off the Cuff is without preparation. And that is exactly what my show is. It's a show where it's without preparation. And I said, that's a great name for the show. And Off the Cuff originally was supposed to be an all-sports show. It was supposed to be nothing but sports. It was supposed to be nothing but sports topics. And I was going to call the show Out of Bounds. I was going to call it all kinds of stuff.
You were wanting to... Were you wanting to do UK specifically, or were just any sport?
It was going to be, yes, it was going to be mostly UK sports, college athletics.
I made a joke the other day that I don't want this podcast to be specifically about sports, because everybody has a UK sports podcast in Lexington.
They do. And yes, it is a very popular subject to talk about here in Lexington, and you will get listens, but not when every Tom, Dick, and Harry has one.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So I tried to create a show that was different. I tried to create a show that I thought people would really be interested in listening to, that had different content. So I knew that Off the Cuff was going to be different than sports within the first couple days into practicing for the shows.
Which you do give some highlight to UK sports, because it's still unavoidable here in Lexington. We do the same thing here. I just interviewed Max Godby from the football team and stuff like that. He runs a sports podcast here in town. So.
It is. It's inevitable.
But you want to branch into still other stuff as well.
Yeah. It's this show, Off the Cuff, that I host. It's about pop culture, current events, and sports, and a little bit about my life and what's going on personally with me that I always add as anecdotes into each episode about what I'm doing. So, yeah, I talk about sports.
Had to open up a novel here. We read a lot of books here on Friends in the Corner podcast. So,
and I do like the sound effects.
Yeah, hey, that's just the crack of the book, reading some novels.
Exactly.
How are you liking your novel?
Man, this is great. I've never read this novel before, but it's really good.
It's good stuff, man.
It is good stuff. Who is the author of this?
I believe it's the West of Six.
He needs to write more.
He does, man.
He does need to write more. But so that's just how the whole concept of the show, the whole premise of the show was to talk about current events, pop culture, and sports. And that's just, it took off from there, and 222 episodes later, here we are.
That's what I was about to say, man. So, obviously, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is that you're about 200, beyond 200 episodes deep, 221 by this point.
221, yep.
I'm on 2 by the time this episode comes out.
Okay.
So, tell me, what have you learned a lot doing over 200 episodes since then?
The first couple podcasts that you do are always your funnest.
Really?
They're so much fun because you're experiencing it all for the first time. It's a rush. You get that rush when you turn on that mic. I don't care who you are, how many times you do it. You got a rush when you flipped on that microphone. There's just something that gives you adrenaline when you flip it on, and it's your own show, and you get a chance to interview. And within time, that kind of goes away because you get really used to it. But those first couple episodes, you can never get that feeling back. Mm-hmm. It's just so much fun to do it with. And advice for anyone wanting to keep longevity of a podcast, I would just say to always stay consistent with it. One of the greatest quotes I ever heard was from the great Denzel Washington. He said, if you hang around the barbershop long enough, you will eventually get a haircut. And that's how you got to look at this episode. or not this episode, but this as just a podcast as a whole. If you keep putting out episodes and you keep at it every single week, no matter how bad you feel or bored you are or how much you got going on, if you consistently put out a show once a week, no matter what's going on, and you keep doing it and you're consistent at it, no matter what, you will have 200. It's inevitable. If you don't give yourself another alternative, it's going to be one show every week, or else you will eventually wind up with 221 episodes like I did.
That's awesome, man. So we're hoping Friends in the Corner can eventually meet that point too here. We'll get to 200 by the time you get to 500.
Do you plan on adding a co-host?
Eventually. It's just trying to find the right person to deal with me.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
You have to find someone to compliment me.
Oh, listen, it took me 9 years to find a girlfriend. And somehow Catherine is still with me after 9. Wow, how long have we been dating? I'm sorry, babe. I know you're going to be listening to this. We're at 7, 8 now.
7, 8 years?
Months, no.
Oh, 7, 8 months.
Yeah. Love you, babe.
Hey, congrats, man. So when you say 9 years from when? Your last girlfriend?
Yeah, in high school. So and then I met Catherine back in November, and we went on our first dates in December, made it official on New Year's Day, and now we're still together somehow. Miraculously, and she's met all my family and still with me. So it's a miracle in itself.
Why do you think it's taken 9 years?
I don't. You know what? I tell people this, and I wasn't quite planning on making this a Catherine cast, but I mean, it wasn't that I wasn't pursuing other girls, but it's just that those girls just weren't the right fit, and somehow Catherine turned out to be the right fit. So
yeah, you know when you know.
Yeah, and she's a great girl. So we'll introduce you. So. What about you? What's your love life like these days?
My love life, man, is going pretty good. I'm dating a girl from West Virginia.
Nice. She's not one of your students now, is she?
She is not. No.
Thank God.
Why does everybody say that?
Well, it's just an assumption. I'm sorry.
Everybody always assumes that. I'm like, she's from West Virginia. They're like, how did you meet her? Because I don't go out to West Virginia. I go to work and I come home. But we met, and we have been talking now since November. And we're dating. We're dating now. Mm-hmm. And
FBO? Are you not about that? You're 30.
I am 30. I am not about the Facebook official. And to be honest with you, as far as social media goes, I don't ever get on there and look at what anybody else is doing. I'm only on there to post what I'm doing or promoting my podcast. I don't care what anyone else is doing.
Putting a segue here, I want to get back to the relationship, but that's something else I'm interested in hearing, because you're very honest on your podcast about where you stand. I've listened to a few episodes about where you stand as far as political views go and other stuff like that. So do people respond to that in different ways? Yeah,
so I do avoid political talk on Facebook because I hate that forum. Mm-hmm. I hate it. Just people hiding behind a keyboard. I think my expressions can come out better in the podcast. That's why I like to express it through that medium. Mm-hmm. But yeah, people do respond. People like to approach me in person if they know me. They're like, oh, I heard this and you had this to say about this. And I'll stand by it. I'm like, yeah, I don't say anything that I don't believe to be true on my podcast. I try to speak the truth as much as I can.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Back to the relationship.
So, yeah, we've been dating. We've known each other since November. We've been dating, I would say, since June. And
it took you that long, man?
It did take a while. I think it was the long-distance relationship. We wasn't spending a lot of time together, so it took us longer to get to know each other. But she's cool. She's sweet. She's nice. There's potential there.
Good.
At my age, you really have to only date people that have potential.
Right. So. That's how I feel too. I'm a little younger than you. I'm post college. I've got a full time career and stuff like that. It's like I don't have time to really, date the girl I just met last night at the bar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was like, I want something that's going to last. And Catherine's been that good to me in that regard, and obviously it sounds like this girl's been that same way. And she's not one of your students.
She is not one of my students, man.
Okay.
She is not. It is not something I'm willing to do. Like, you have to be smart when it comes to being a college professor, because there is temptation, but you have to really ask yourself, is it worth it? No, it's not. And so I just try to stay away from that altogether.
Hey, that's good regard, man.
I avoid that.
Well, and there's beyond just the information. I work in the academic field as well, so that's good information for me as well. But just some good information about starting podcasts and stuff like that. And I love what you said about the episodes. Your first couple episodes are fun because you're really starting to learn and figure stuff out and stuff like that. And we're at this episode 2 is the same way. If you're hearing some static back, it's because from my previous interview with Max Godby, I've left my microphone at his house, so we're recording off some of the most jerry-rigged issues ever.
How do I sound? Do I sound good?
You sound fantastic, man. It's me. I'm getting some revert on me, but that's okay. Next episode, I promise you. Stick with me, guys. It's going to be good. I promise.
Yeah.
Have you ever met Max Godby or know of him?
I do know of him. I've never met him. I know a couple. I know one personally, football player on the team this year.
Who's that?
Mike Edwards, the Badger, number 7, the safety. Yeah, I know him, but
is he from your hometown?
He's
something?
not. Okay. No, he's just a person that I met. I meet so many people in so many different random ways. He was just one of these people that I met just through out there socializing, and I know him, but I do feel good with where Kentucky football is. I don't like Mark Stoops, and I don't think that Mark Stoops...
Really?
I don't think Mark Stoops is a good coach. I think he's horrible.
I mean, compared to what we went through with Joker...
Joker was worse. I mean...
I mean, it's Kentucky football. I'm a Buckeye fan, so I know privileged football. But it's like as far as when I was a Kentucky fan, never having a winning season when I was there. It's like I feel like this is the best it's going to get is with Stoops.
It could be. We'll see how this is going to be the year to see how he really. This is going to test him to see how he really does because he's got all seniors. He's got a good offense and defense. So we'll see.
Okay. Well, cool. And we're not a sports podcast, neither of us are. We just touch on some sports,
like we are now.
Dabbling, exactly. So
just a little touch.
So I was going to say, it's good to hear another review though, because Max was singing. Obviously, he played for the guy, but he was singing Stoops' praises on my last podcast here. So it's good to hear another side of it.
He did like Stoops.
Yeah, he loves Stoops.
Okay.
Yeah, so
I'm sure he's a wonderful human being, but as far as a coach, I think he sucks.
Who would you rather have if we got rid of Stoops by the end of this season? Because the only guy on my list, I can't believe he doesn't have a job by this point, is Les Miles.
Oh, Les Miles?
Yeah.
Okay, the guy that I would love to have at Kentucky, and I'm surprised that we didn't fire Stoops to get this guy. The guy who was at Florida.
Dan Mullen? Or the guy that
the guy who recently got fired from Florida.
Really?
Yeah, the guy who recently got fired. What is his name of heaven?
Edward. He was I know who you're talking about. I'm going to Google it real quickly.
Jim McElwain.
Yeah,
Jim McElwain. Yes,
yeah.
Jim McElwain is who I would like to see at Kentucky, and that kills me that I have that name blank. But yeah, Jim McElwain is the guy I would like to see. If you want to look.
He's a wide receiver coach at Michigan right now.
He is a wide receiver coach, and he is available to be a head coach. But if you want to look at what he's done just overall as a head coach at Florida, it's ridiculous that he got fired. His first year at Florida, he was 10-4, and he went to the Citrus Bowl. His second year, he was 9-4, won 9 games, and won the Outback Bowl. And then he got fired in his third year. I mean, his overall record was 44-28.
But he didn't win the SEC.
And he was so close at it every year.
It's like Toronto fired their head coach because they didn't beat LeBron James.
Yeah.
Florida fires their head coach because he didn't beat Alabama.
Mm-hmm. Jim McElwain, was at Kentucky, you would see a different football team. You would see a different team. You would see a team that wins. Stoops, Kentucky has the talent, but they're never going to get to where they need to be with Mark Stoops. It's never going to happen.
Interesting. I would love, and maybe this is an idea for a future podcast, would you, and I have to cover this, and Max will say yes.
Yeah, get me Max on here debating.
Yeah.
I would debate him because, I mean, he would have more intimate stories to tell because he's played for Stoops, and he would know more. So I would be coming in a little as the underdog in this.
Oh, yeah.
But I would debate him.
Okay. Max, you've been called out by Adam Banks from Off the Cuff. BB and Chalk Talk versus Off the Cuff, facilitated by Friends in the Corner. Never been done before. A triple threat podcast crossover. It's coming.
Invite us all here to your studio.
I think that's a great time. So, Max, text me later, buddy.
Listen to the show, which is going to release when? When's this episode dropping?
I'm looking at August 20th.
Okay.
So we're getting there.
We're on the premiere week.
But I kind of segueing into that. You kind of highlighted there a little bit here. We wanted to segue here, but you said, you've obviously with 200 episodes, you've had a lot of different people on the podcast. Hopefully, some of the similar people I'm going to have one of these days on here. But tell me about some of your most memorable interviews that you've done, or most memorable episodes you've done. Maybe it wasn't even an interview you did with somebody. So tell me about.
Okay, I think things changed on this podcast. Things took a turn on this show when I got Dave Baker on.
And who's Dave Baker?
Dave Baker is the radio guy who's been affiliated with UK broadcasting since the 1970s. Buzz Baker, Dave Baker, the guy who does the pregame show for UK with Rex Chapman.
Oh,
when I got Buzz Baker on, that really.
I'm going to throw some shade here, but I try to listen to as little of KSR as possible, and I try to listen. They're not KSR related, are they?
No, not at all.
Exactly. I try to listen to Rex Chapman. I listen to Rex Chapman.
Rex is great.
Yeah,
Rex is very entertaining, and plus, I think there needs to be more former UK talent in broadcasting than what there is. I mean, it's funny. Matt Jones has never even played basketball or football, and he's doing a show on UK sports.
I agree.
It's kind of mind-boggling. But when Dave Baker came on, things changed the tone. That changed the tone of the show because people started to take the show a lot more serious. Because Off the Cuff, if you go back and you listen to the beginning of the episodes pre-Dave Baker, it's a lot of silliness and a lot of joking going on. And Dave is like that first guest for people to be like, whoa, this guy can actually get guests. And then that started to bring on a lot more other people like Patrick. And then I got a few actors. I got the guy from The Little Rascals that played Stymie, Kevin Jamal Woods.
Really?
Yeah, that's one of the most listened to episodes that I've done.
Really? Wow. Yeah. I didn't know that.
Interesting enough. Yeah, I got him. My favorite show is Better Call Saul, which premieres next Monday for the 4th season. I can't wait. And have you watched that?
I've watched a few episodes in here. I'm a big Breaking Bad fan, but
dude, you have to watch Better Call Saul. I love that show so much, so I was like, I would love to get an actor from that show to come on my podcast. So I got Brandon K. Hampton, who plays Ernesto on the show. You'll probably see him towards the end of the first season.
Okay.
Maybe he shows up in the second season. I can't remember. But he came on the show and I did an interview. But it opened up a lot of opportunity. Coach Cal's son, Brad, came on the show, who currently plays for the UK basketball team. So I've had some pretty notable people come on the show. And how that process happens is you will be surprised what you get out of people by just asking them, Dan.
Really?
Just ask them. Don't be afraid to ask. What's the worst they can tell you? No?
Yeah. And that's good advice for me because as I try to sit here and think, because I know a lot of famous friends. Obviously, I've got Mr. Adam Banks from Off the Cuff here on with me, but
right, the most famous one that you've got.
When you think and talk to people, and that's the one thing I ask is like, the worst they can say is no, exactly. Or call you out on their own podcast.
Yeah,
Matt Jones.
The reason I have a problem with Matt personally is because I asked Matt to come do the show, and Matt said he would. He wrote me and said he would do it, and then on the day that we agreed to do it, he was a no-show. Mm-hmm. And I just held that personally. I mean, I know that he's big time, and I was very much small time at the time. It's still rude.
Didn't he say something about you on his show?
he did have like an issue with like what it was when I saw him the night before that show that he did say something about me. What it was I told him about my podcast, and I was like telling him about like how I loved his show and I was a big fan, and a lot of the stuff I do on my show, he inspires me a little bit, embarrassingly enough to say I said at the time.
Yeah.
And he got on the air and said that if you want to replicate him, you're never going to go anywhere because it's already been done. And he discouraged people from starting podcasts. And he hates podcasts, and then he goes out and starts one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I ended up getting his co-host, Ryan Lippman, on the show, which actually ended up being my favorite interview I ever did.
And I haven't obviously. Well, I talked to him once. He came and spoke to a journalism class, but I've always heard Ryan Lippman is awesome.
He is. He's so down to earth. He did the interview in his car. He was in the car with his family, his wife Amanda, and his kids, and he was Christmas shopping. And he did the interview. He took the time out to do the interview, and he did a great interview.
Amazing. And
he come across so well in the interview, so relaxed and down to earth, and just. It was my favorite interview to date. It might have not have been the biggest one I did, but it was my favorite one.
What's been the biggest one so far?
The most listened to, for me, the most listened to interview was the Kevin Jamal Woods from the Little Rascals. Mm-hmm. I think the interview that changed the tone of the podcast was the Dave Baker. But Brad Calipari was a pretty big one, too.
And that's one I was very intrigued by, because when we first met and we started talking about your podcast, that was the one you recommended that I would listen to first. And so it was a good interview.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it was great. And obviously, there's some red tape to go through if you're going to interview a current UK basketball player.
It was easier to get Brad on the show back in the time
because he was in high school.
He was just in high school, and he could do anything he wanted to. And I just reached out to him on Twitter, and I said, "Would you do a podcast?" And he private messaged me, and he said yes, he would. He gave me his cell phone number, which I was surprised.
Ballsy, yeah.
I was very surprised. Yeah, he gave me his cell phone number, and I called him. I just called him and talked to him on the phone before I did the interview. Told him who I was, what I wanted to do, and just interviewed him. And what I thought was really cool about that interview is I'm sure Coach Cal listened to it because, hey, one, it's his son. Mm-hmm. And he's going to want to listen to see what his son's saying, especially in high school. And he wanted to see what I was all about. So what was really cool was knowing that Coach Cal, the most popular man in Kentucky, is listening to Off the Cuff.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. But it was a nerve-wracking interview. I got through it. I was pretty nervous because I knew that it would be a big deal to interview him.
Yeah. And I was going to say, when you told me that, because this was before Brad, officially committed to...
And he had never done interviews. Like, you could look and you could never really see an interview with Brad Calipari.
And where was he playing at LCA, or where was he at the time?
He was in a different state at a prep school.
Really?
Yeah, and I remember he was interviewing... He said he was in his room at the time, and he was about to go work out, but he was taking a few minutes out to do the interview.
Okay.
Yeah, he was real cool. I have nothing bad to say about Brad. Anybody who comes on the Off the Cuff, I have nothing bad to say about him.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So,
and they're a fan. I'm a fan of them if they come on my show.
So, do you have an episode that's your favorite that you've done, whether it's someone you've interviewed or someone or just one you've just shot off the cuff on?
Absolutely,
yeah,
I do.
What's your favorite one?
My favorite... I have two.
Okay.
My favorite, really, podcast that I've ever done is, I think it's the 5th episode. It's called I Like the Way You Talk.
Okay.
And it was with my co-host, my old co-host, who did over 85 episodes with me. She is gone. She had to leave the show for...
Who was this?
This was Nellie.
Nellie. Shout out to Nellie. Cheers to Nellie.
Shout out to Nellie.
A good novel.
Nellie, I wish was here right now. She would bring a different... pizzazz to the podcast. She's been in over 85 episodes, and Nellie brought just that older perspective. She was 50. She's 59 right now, so she was in her mid-50s when she did the show with me. And we started talking about people's accents from just the country and the mountains.
Where is she from? Lexington, or where's she from?
She is from Harrison County.
Okay.
So not really the country, but I'm from Appalachia. So I was making fun of a lot of the accents that are there, and I can do that. I can the excuse to do that because I'm from there. Because I love those people. Those are the salt of the earth people. One of the most listened to episodes that's not an interview type episode, that episode right there, and I can see why. You can just tell the off the cuff is just exuberating out of that episode.
Right.
The way we're laughing and going on, you need to listen to it. It's a good episode to listen to.
What, episode 5?
Episode 5 is kind of like when we talk.
Episode 5 of Off the Cuff, everybody. Check that one out.
Please. You will get a kick out of it. The contagious laughter will rub off on you. Yeah, because there's a lot of laughter.
Awesome, man.
A lot of laughter.
Well, man, I think now it's time to move into my next topic here is the Hot Topic segment. Are you ready for this?
I am. This is what I'm built for.
All right. Obviously, you run a pop culture podcast here. It had a lot of different people in here. So what we do for this segment of the podcast is I give you a hot topic, and then you just say off the cuff, quote unquote, whatever comes to your mind first. So today's date, August 30th. Here are the topics that are in the news right now.
July 30th. You said August is July 30th.
Thank you for correcting me here.
You're welcome.
All right, so July 30th. LeBron James opens up his new school for at-risk children in Akron, says it's the greatest moment of his life.
I think that LeBron James is trying to really show that he does truly care for the city of Akron. When he left Cleveland the first time, it was totally different than how he left Cleveland this time. He came back to Cleveland. He won a championship for the city. He truly cares. And I think Cleveland's starting to understand that, it was just for business. His hometown is Akron, and I think that LeBron just wants to show that him going to L.A., he's playing for L.A., is business.
Right.
You've got to understand it, unless you're completely ignorant. Why wouldn't LeBron go to L.A.? It's Hollywood. He's got production. Right. He's got a production company out there. He's got movie deals.
He's got a house.
He's got a house. They got good schools out there. Opportunities galore. More than Ohio. I'm sorry.
Well,
Ohio should know that.
And I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and I watched LeBron grow up. Like when he first played high school, he played in the state championship. He played my rival high school there, and I always felt in the back of my head when I was watching him play, or even when he left Cleveland the first time, I always had this thought in the back of my head, like he was going to wind up in LA someday. I kind of believe, and this is just my personal thought, all the best always wind up at the Lakers at some point.
Isn't that interesting?
But it says a lot about that program, you know what I mean?
It is the most famous franchise, one of the most famous sports franchises in the history of sports. I mean, it's ranked right up there with the Yankees. It's ranked right up there with the Dallas Cowboys. It's the Los Angeles Lakers is the franchise of basketball. It is the most famous franchise with Kobe Bryant, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, and now LeBron James. All have played for L.A. If you're Akron, if you're Cleveland, if you're Ohio, you got to know why he did it. LeBron is trying to do things for his state. He won a championship for Cleveland, and he is building a school for his hometown of Akron.
Right.
And I think he's genuine about it. And I think people are more accepting of this. And I truly think he means it when he says this is the greatest accomplishment. I mean, I think he lacks the money that comes along with his other accomplishments. But as far as giving him that feeling of great accomplishment, I think he really does feel honored to open up a school in Akron. I think he's genuine about it. And I think that LeBron leaving Ohio this time, people are more accepting of that.
Right, and especially now that we have a title. And I'm a Browns fan, so we're happy to have something there because we're a tragedy in our own right. We won't get into that. We got to get to our next subject here. So
the Browns, they've been a while.
I'm feeling better about this season, but I'm just going to leave it at that. Papa John is still in the news after John Shatner. It's Shatner, right?
I thought it was Schneider, but
John Schneider. I think you're right. John Schneider resigned as CEO. Papa John is now suing his former company because, quote from the Courier Journal, of the unexplained and heavy-handed way in which the company has treated him since all that news broke out?
Well, I did a podcast episode on Papa John, and I believe it's called Papa John is the name of the episode, so check it out. And I talked about this. I think that the whole Papa John situation was blown way out of proportion. I think that it's ridiculous how we are just going ahead and assuming that a person is a bad person off of one comment that they make. Okay, yeah, he said an inappropriate word. He did. And it shouldn't have been said. And I've said that the N-word should be banished altogether. I don't even think the black culture should be using it because it does nothing but keep the word alive. Mm-hmm. And he said it. Okay, yeah, he said it. But I know a lot of good, solid people in this world who have said that word, and they don't have a malicious, like, hate or vendetta in their heart to make the lives of black people miserable. They don't look to seek to make their lives bad. They've just said it in passing because it's just a word that they've heard. It's a part of what they grew up hearing. They don't mean anything bad by it. And I don't excuse anyone to say it. I would never say it. I think it's a stupid word. It's a dirty word, and I don't think people should say it. But the fact that Papa John had to resign from his own company for that reason, I'd be damned if I ever resigned from my company. I would be damned if I was ever forced to be resigning from my company. I would never do it. And he did it, and he regrets doing it. And he regrets doing it because he realizes, I think, after a couple of days have passed, that he knows that he was forced out. Mm-hmm. And I think he's fighting for it. I think that Papa John is, I've always heard that he's kind of got a hateful nature about him. Mm-hmm. But, hey, he does a lot of good things, too. Papa John, I think, was supposed to donate like millions of dollars for renovations to schools in the city of Louisville, all kinds of places. He does all kinds of charity work. So
yeah, especially nationwide, his name's really well known. But in the state of Kentucky where we live, he's one of the top 10 most recognized human beings in this state.
Up there. He's a billionaire.
Kyle's obviously probably number one, but next to down the list there, he's in there.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Papa John, he is very recognizable. So I think that him saying that word, it jeopardized his whole, business, but. You could take his face off the marketing material, but they're still using his name, Papa John.
And, that's going to be something interesting to see how they get around that. Certain stuff I agree with you on. The one thing for me is I think in 2018, you just can't assume that what you say doesn't have consequences, especially in this, like in podcasts like what we do and stuff like that. You are always... And in social media and stuff like that, you are always being heard. Mm-hmm. And you are accountable for every word that you say.
Yeah.
And so that's just my stances. So I personally think like the action was just in what was taken on Papa John and resigning and stuff like that, because there's just no way you can bounce back. As an individual, you can bounce back from that in that situation. That's just my belief.
There are consequences, and there should be consequences for what he said. Mm-hmm. But the fact that he had to resign, like, Roseanne, when they fired her for, she did compare a woman to an ape, which was a little bit more extreme. They cancel Roseanne's show because of something that she said. I think about all these people who have said these things, and it just wasn't publicized because the technology didn't exist. Like Walt Disney. I read somewhere that he was for Nazis, and he supported the Nazis. Think about that. If that would have came out in 2018, there would be no Walt Disney movies. He'd be shut down. He'd be looked upon as just a horrible person. So, but he's looked upon as this just magical person. I think that people like Roseanne and Papa John, they still are good people, but they just they made very bad decisions with the comments and words that they chose to use. And that's the consequences for it, but I think that's a little extreme. I think there was just That was just a little extreme for him to have to step down.
Topic number 3 here. After playing at Louisville Jam Fest, UK basketball recruit Dante Allen will be visiting UK this week to meet with Coach Cal. If he does commit to UK, he will be the first in-state commit since Hawkins and I can't remember the other guy's name. He just played for us recently.
There was Poulsen, there was Willis, there was Hawkins.
Willis, that's the one I saw in the article. So Hawkins and Willis were the most recent UK ones. But what do you think about that?
Well, he's a 6'6" shooting guard.
From Pendleton County. And he's a Kentucky boy. He's very talented. I think Kentucky always needs to have Kentucky boys on the team, whether it's a walk-on or whether it's 1 or 2 scholarships. I agree.
So, this guy is the perfect addition to add. I think he's got versatility. He's an excellent shooter. Is he up for Mr. Kentucky basketball?
I don't know.
I'm assuming he is, if he's being looked at by UK.
Right.
So I think that it's a win situation. In order to keep the fans happy and to pacify the fans, I think you need to have somebody from Kentucky on the team.
Right. And I think that's like what Louisville does good. They get some of the better players from Kentucky on that team, and they do pretty well. And I think that's one of the issues with UK in general. And as a kid as someone, I'm a recruiter for a community college here. I talk to a lot of kids in the Lexington area. We see a lot of the Lexington kids who are the best players in this city here. They don't want to go to UK because they don't want to sit on the bench. You know where they're going? They're going to Western.
Yeah.
They're going to EKU.
So they can get playing time.
So they get playing time. You know what I mean? And so I think that kind of says, in a way, I do want Kentucky players on my team. I am recruiting the best in the nation to come here because that's the nature of this blue blood program. But I do want these Kentucky kids who are passionate about this state to come here and do the same work here. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, and I think it will also pacify the fans too, because a lot of people love, and some of their most favorite teams that they ever can remember cheering for were the teams back in the Rick Pitino era when he had people from Kentucky. Like when Pitino was doing his thing at Kentucky, he had all Kentucky boys. When he was winning Elite Eights and going to Final Fours, he had people like John Pelfrey, and he had people like Richie Farmer, people who were born and bred in Kentucky that were playing for the state of Kentucky. Mm-hmm. Pelfrey was from Paintsville. Richie Farmer, where was he from? He was from Eastern Kentucky.
Yeah.
So you have all these Kentucky boys that played for the UK basketball team. The fans went nuts over it. They went bananas over it. And it was the most fascinating time in Kentucky history, really, was in that mid to early 90s when Pitino had Kentucky boys going to Final Fours. And people miss that. And with the Cal era, it's really been missing because we have people from Chicago, New York, Texas. They're the greatest in the world, but they're from different areas. Yeah, so it would pacify the fans if we at least had 1 or 2 Kentucky people.
Last topic here, man. Today is July 30th, 2018. It is the 50th year anniversary of the Big Mac at McDonald's.
It is.
So tell me what your feelings are towards that.
Well, the Big Mac is revolutionary. They've sold billions of that sandwich.
Oh my God. It's probably the most advertised sandwich in the world. People
know what the Big Mac is. Big Mac is everywhere. McDonald's is everywhere. When I went out of the country to Ecuador, I ate at McDonald's. It's impossible to avoid it. Mm-hmm. The Big Mac is, like you said, the most famous sandwich. McDonald's, unfortunately, when I eat it, it makes me want to throw up after I eat it because it's something about McDonald's when you eat it, dude. It just doesn't feel like it's real food.
Yeah. No, exactly.
It's not healthy.
I haven't had a Big Mac in a couple years. I've had McDonald's a little more recently, but I usually buy like fries and stuff like that. And it's usually when I'm coming from downtown after a good night out with the boys. But but you know what I mean.
It's good hangover food.
Yeah, exactly. So, what's your preferred go-to here? Because I myself am a Taco Bell guy after some fun time downtown. But what's yours?
Okay, my preferred fun time after downtown is Wendy's, hands down. The little square cheeseburgers.
Catherine, agree with you.
Yeah, with no, they don't cut corners, man. That's what Wendy's says. They don't cut corners. They have the square cheeseburgers. They have the best fries. They have ice cream there. Wendy's is the best fast food restaurant. If I was a billionaire, if I won the Mega Millions jackpot, I would still eat Wendy's every day. I love Wendy's. It's the greatest place on earth, man. I eat Wendy's probably 3 times a week.
It is the best deal for your buck. For $4, you can get a lot of food.
It is, but you can't take away from what the Big Mac did and what it's done. It's the most famous sandwich, and it's a good sandwich. I'm personally a quarter pounder guy myself, but the Big Mac, I don't think it's really the best thing on the menu, but it is the most famous thing on the menu.
Yeah, they promote that thing like other than anything else that they offer. So.
It's too much bread.
Well, that's what I tell people is like I'd rather get a Whopper, which is like the competitor.
Yeah,
it's more meat.
Yeah,
and you're just getting bread and sauce if you just buy a Big Mac.
Well, that's why I like the quarter pounder from McDonald's. You get more meat.
Well, we've had a lot of fun talking here today, man. It's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for being a guest on Friends in the Corner with me, man.
Well, man, I really appreciate it. And Dan, I tell you, I think that this podcast is going to be pretty successful.
Thank you.
I like your content. I like the vibe. I like the energy of your show. I think that you are going to be very approachable for a lot of guests, which is going to be a good thing that's going to help you out, man. And thank you for letting me be a part of the elite all-star lineup cast that you have on your first couple episodes.
Well, I appreciate it, man. I know you mentioned stuff at the start here, but do you have any advice? Obviously, we're a young podcast here. You're going to be my second episode out. Any advice for someone who's just starting off in the podcast world here?
All I have to say is, like I said before, just be consistent. Stay consistent with your work. Always try to evolve. Always try to change. Look at what's working, what's not working. Pay attention to your audience. Pay attention who's listening. Women, men, look at the age and look at what they like to listen to. If you're talking about something on one episode and that particular episode gets a lot of listens, you may be onto something. So just be as free and as off the cuff, no pun intended, as you can, and you will be fine.
All right, man. The rest of this time is yours, man. Floor is yours. If there's anything you want to promote, share your social media tags, whatever you want. This is your time, is yours.
Sure, man. I will just say, if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me at AdamBanks88, or you could follow my podcast by going to Facebook.com/Off the Cuff with Adam Banks, or you could look up Off the Cuff on iTunes. It's pretty easy. Just go to the little iTunes app, type in Off the Cuff on the podcast app there, and you will find me. You will see Off the Cuff with Adam Banks. And that's pretty much all the ways that you can hear Off the Cuff. You can find me on YouTube, too. Go to Off the Cuff Podcast on YouTube, and you'll find me there. So there's a lot of places to find Off the Cuff to listen to it and to follow me.
All right. That's Adam Banks from Off the Cuff, guys. He's 221 episodes deep. I'm sure more by the time we release this podcast. You got one in the works right now?
I do not have one in the works right now. I'll be recording just in a couple of days. I release them every Thursday.
All right. Every Thursday, guys, check out a new episode of Off the Cuff. And, brother, it's good to have you on. I'm sure we're going to have some more episodes down the road here.
Yes, Dan. I look forward to it. You'll have to come on the show as well.
All right. Let's do this. Crossovers. Let's go.
Let's do it.
Crossovers. Let's go.
Let's do it.
All right. I want to say thank you again to Mr. Adam Banks of Off the Cuff for doing a wonderful interview with us and just for giving some good advice. It was also good just to catch up with him after almost a year of not seeing each other. It's good to just catch up. It's like old friends just being reunited. Fantastic. But you should check out Adam Banks on Twitter. He's on Twitter at AdamBanks88. You should also check out his podcast, Off the Cuff, on Facebook. It's at Facebook.com/Off the Cuff with Adam Banks. He's also on YouTube and iTunes. He actually made it on iTunes. Hopefully we'll be there one day, but you can check out Friends in the Corner right now at Stitcher, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Google Play.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, wasn't that fun? Wasn't that fun to sit there and listen to Dan's new podcast, listen to his new thing he's got started, his new project, and to have me, Adam Banks, as the second episode, the second guest on the show? I like it that it's a show about interesting people in Lexington and that he put me on the premiere couple episodes. It means a lot. It does. I appreciate Dan, and I look to get Dan on Off the Cuff very, very soon. Maybe the next episode, Dan's going to sit down in the Off the Cuff studios and have an Off the Cuff podcast with me, Adam Banks. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. I will see you in the next episode of Off the Cuff.
Call me Rain Man. Money like a shower, that's my rain dance. And we all in black like it's gangland. Say the wrong words, you be hangman. Why me stick to your bitch like a spray tan? Mister, what kind of car you in?